Welcome back. You're listening to Get Real with Bob and Stacy. You're joining us for our Leaders and Legends segment. And our guest is Pamela Hull, career interior designer and painter, and after the loss of her husband, changed the focus of her life and became an author. Her newest book, Say Yes Flying Solo at 60. Welcome to the show, Pamela.
Hi, Bob. Good morning.
So,
Stacy, hi there.
Hi. Thanks for being on the
Hi.
show. I want to share this amazing bio that Pamela sent over to us. I think it's going to speak for itself, and it's going to make you want to buy the book because I know it made me want to buy the book. Here's her bio. Eating fresh figs and a wedge of cheese, Pamela Hull sat on the edge of Bernini's Fountain of the Four Rivers in the Piazza Navona in Rome, marveling once again on how she came to be here. Just over 60, her husband, a physician, had died 3 years earlier, and they had hardly ever traveled abroad. And yet, here she was, living alone for 2 months in an ancient palazzo, eagerly writing stories of encounters and observations. Quote, all of it feeling like a dream, and perhaps it was, entirely of my own making, she recounts, conceiving and executing the trip without an ounce of input from anyone. Friends were protective. Going alone? What if she got into trouble or needed help? Family admonished, she really shouldn't. Best to go on a tour or go with a friend. Massachusetts born and bred in a charming old New England town, Miss Hull attended boarding school, Dana Hall in Wellesley, Mass. From there to University of Pennsylvania, and then into the arms of her 36-year marriage that ended in pancreatic cancer for her husband and a new, unwelcome freedom for her. What next? Continue on with a successful career as an interior designer and painter, or try something different? She boldly took advantage of an unusual opportunity to live abroad for 2 months, an event which utterly changed her life, and she moved out of her comfort zone to find what was beyond her known abilities. What could she become with other choices, other opportunities? Now was the time to find out. At age 60, she wrote her first book, Where's My Bride? A Memoir of a Marriage, then a fictional autobiography, Dandelions Endure. Many of her essays were published in highly acclaimed journals such as the Bellevue Literary Review, North Dakota Quarterly, Lumina, Blood and Thunder, and others. And then Say Yes, Flying Solo After 60, her current release, an unfurling of how expanding one's life beyond what is safe and habitual can be thrilling, satisfying, and pleasurable from anything previously known or experienced. Anyone, whether married or single, young or old, can find themselves pursuing a new passion, picking up old desires, or eating figs by a fountain in the Piazza Navona. We don't even need to interview you. It's enough. That's awesome.
That really
it's
is
amazing. That is amazing. I want this book. I'm already excited to read it. So.
Oh, well, it did say it all. I hadn't read that for a while, and honestly, it sounded kind of nice having you read that. I'm thrilled you did that.
So, you were an interior designer, painter, did you write before? How did you start with a book?
I never wrote before at all.
Holy cow.
I wrote letters to kids at camp.
Wow.
I really didn't write. I'm sort of creative anyway, but I never picked up a pen. And when my husband died, he was a modest man. And there were pieces of him that this one knew and that one knew, but nobody knew the whole of him. And I wanted to put together the whole person. So I decided to do it as a standalone project and talk about universal traits in marriage, too. Then I was 4/5 the way through that, and I said, this is not a standalone project. I love this. I'm switching my life. And I started to seriously get into writing and learn how to do it. And so I started writing many essays, the second book. But I think the interesting thing for this one, for Say Yes, the idea happened, two things actually happened simultaneously in my life, 12 years after he died. One is I had a chance to live in Florence for 2 months a couple of years after he died. I had never really traveled. He was a solo obstetrician, and we never went anywhere, far. And my friends were very sophisticated and had traveled everywhere, but they couldn't understand how I would go alone to a country where I didn't know anybody and didn't speak any Italian. And the second thing that happened was, at the same time, I had written my first book at this time, started a new career, and friends were amazed. Like, how can you pick it up now? And why don't you just enjoy what you're doing? And why bother? And then I found out that they were all accomplished. They were all smart. They were all well-traveled. And my life was expanding, and theirs wasn't.
Right.
Why? And everyone had wish lists. People would say to me, I always wanted to play piano. I always wanted to paint. I always wanted to make a beef Wellington or something. And I said, or I want to learn to drive. And my answer is, so why don't you? And they were full of excuses. I can't. I have arthritis. I don't have time. My kids will laugh. And I thought, I've got to write a book about this. All these masses of numbers of people who want to do things and want to, and I thought they could make their life more of what we want and not just in actuality and not just dream about it. How do you get from there to there? How do you take that step from wishful thinking into reality so that your life becomes more than what you expect and more than what you could do? People can do so many things that they don't realize. Did I realize I could become a writer? It never entered my head. But I picked up on cues. You've got to pick up on cues. You can't let them get by. If something interests you, if something calls to you, if an opportunity arises, do we just sort of go on with our day and finish our errands, or do we stop and take notice? So I wanted to address that.
And I don't you think that people don't have to experience loss in order to really appreciate the book?
Absolutely not. That's a terrific question. I'm getting I start out with loss because I'm talking about how to find moxie and the courage to go somewhere else. But I talked to a hedge fund guy who's married. He's 48 years old. He's making a ton of money, wants to change his life. He doesn't know what to do about it. He has the same issue as a loss. I talked to a 35-year-old woman the other day. She has a similar problem. She wants to do something different. And anybody, this appeals to anybody who wants to has other thoughts with their life, or is stuck, or is afraid, or fearful, or hesitant, or uncomfortable what their colleagues would say or their children would say, and just kind of want to go to a different place. And it doesn't have to be a huge, massive thing. You don't have to suddenly decide. Traveling to Italy, when I went to Florence, and I wasn't sure how it was going to work out, and it was so great. I said, I'm going to do this every year. And then the next year I went to Rome, then I went to London, then I went to Paris, 2 months living there on a budget, and it never occurred to me in my life. But when I was in Florence, I could have just come home. But instead I said, no, I'm going to do this. But that was my thing. I fell into that. But you could do this living in your own living room. You want to play piano, learn. Figure out how to do it and get it done. You want to learn to ski or ice skate. You can do these things at home. That happened to be my thing, but everybody has a different take on what's in their head, and it's for anybody at any age. I mainly title that because I'm over 60.
So talk about. I'm definitely interested in your travel experiences. I went in November for the first time on a vacation, basically by myself, and I'm addicted to it. I met so many great new friends, and it was amazing. And I always had a fear about traveling by myself, like who would I have dinner with and who am I going to talk to? And it ended up being an amazing trip. Can you share your travel experiences and how it felt to travel by yourself?
Well, when you were talking, I was going to say, what made you go by yourself just because you wanted? I mean, look, nothing is that easy. But, if you're fearful about things or you're shy or you're hesitant, you could feel that way in your own environment unless you're right with your friends. You can go to the next town and be stuck in how to deal with things. I was living outside of New York City in a suburban area, and the loss was terribly acute for me at the time, and I thought, what's the difference if I'm in Florence or I'm in Westchester? You're alone, so why not be alone in Italy? It was fine. There are times that are hard. I mean, people get stuck on the technicalities. How will I book? Where will I stay? Will it be safe? Will I lose my medicine? Will I fall? What happens if I lose my passport? Those are questions that are very easily answered ahead of time. I asked my doctor if he knew anybody in Florence, so I had the name of a doctor. I had emergency numbers, and I just went. You wander. You have to, for traveling in particular, you have to like wandering a little bit alone. I'm a talker. I would sit down. People are travelers everywhere. They're eating gelato. You sit next to them and you ask them what flavor they're having, or you just pick up people. You sit. People are very amenable to doing that when you're traveling, especially tourists. You see American tourists everywhere, and once you do it, once you engage a couple of times, then it becomes easier. It really is like anything. To overcome that initial reluctance, and then suddenly the world looks different to you. It looks welcoming. The person that's standing by the fountain, you can comment on it because he's sort of somebody you can connect with instead of somebody you're afraid of. You have to do these little things. You start. And once you do, you gain confidence in your place in the world and your ability to get around. I mean, I had some really funny experiences. I was in a bus in Florence, the only time I took a bus, actually, and it was a bus that held 12 people because the streets were so small. And, I saw people were not paying, and I didn't understand it, so I didn't pay. And all of a sudden, we stopped at a stop, and the whole bus emptied except me because it wasn't my stop. And I found out that the man who checks your coupon if you've paid came on, and all the Italians knew who that person was, and I didn't. And so I had to deal with that. So you have stuff like that are strange, but if you, I laughed it off. I figured that out. We talked. We found somebody who spoke English, and that gives me confidence not to be afraid of the next thing.
So what's the big thing on your bucket list that you want to do next?
Well, I'm writing on another book.
Wow.
I have, an endless bucket list, and I just wish there were 40 hours in the day. I get upset when some of my friends say that they're bored,
right?
Or, the day is so long. That's very upsetting to me because it's never long enough for me, and these are friends with great interests. They just need to sort of move into a different place, I think. I'm going to a couple of cities to talk about the book. In fact, I'm going to be in Boston at the end of April.
Well, we'll have to check out, while we have you on the subject, where can people follow you so that we can find out where you're going to be touring?
Well, I have a Facebook page for now.
Okay.
And they can go on that. And that's mainly it. They can, by the way, just get the book on Amazon or Barnes & Noble or at local bookstores through Ingram. And I have an email address in the book.
Okay.
And anybody can write to me directly. I would love to do that. So
what's the next book about?
The next book, well, I'm feeling my way through it now. It's going to be something about life passages, certain experiences that different. a childhood, young adult, young woman, mature woman, certain events that happened during each of those periods that marked me and made me who I am, and that we all have those moments that transform our character or cement our character in different ways. And I'm just exploring the possibilities of being a little introspective and looking back. You know, another thing I find that as you get older, people say, "Oh, I'm like this because of my mother," or "She was so strict," or "My father, I didn't have a father," or whatever the issue is. And what little experiences in very ordinary happenings that have an unfurling of insight that led you to one way rather than another.
Right. Wow.
So so I just think people have to, it depends if you're totally content with everything. But if anything's gnawing at you, I mean, the time to look at that is it's the present.
Right.
And you could be having a full-time career. This isn't something that has to happen when you're retired.
Right.
I mean, you can put many things into your life that will be pleasing and uncover things in yourself that you never knew you had. Skills, talents, abilities.
Right.
But where does the shift come and how does it come? It's a process. So that's what I wrote about. And this is not a guidebook. It's not a manual. It's stories like the figs at the Piazza Navona, one story after another. That's like a fictional book, so that people really enjoy reading it.
I love it. Well, unfortunately, our time is up. We have with us today Pamela Hull, teaching us how to say yes to life. Her book is Say Yes, Flying Solo at 60. And you can find her book on Amazon and find her on Facebook. Again, Pamela Hull, author of Say Yes, Flying Solo at 60. Thank you for joining us today.
Flying Solo After 60, excuse me.
Flying Solo After 60. Thank you.
Thank you, Pamela.
Thank you, Stacy and Bob. Thank you so much. So good to talk to you.
Same here.
Bye-bye.
That's all for this edition of Get Real. Join us again next weekend for more.